hello, Mike.
Jack, fabulous to see you again this week.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Yeah, how are you?
I just got through grading a lot of papers, so
Mm,
that be part of my anecdotal
mm.
evidence
All
as
right.
to how often people still like to organize by alphabet and or
Mm,
so I think part of our topic today, and please help me with this, is how much we rely on numbers and why that's maybe going to change as we get more facile with generative AI techniques. But why don't you tell me your take on that?
Well, I think
Numbers, alphabet
yeah,
is arbitrary as numbers sometimes, right?
yeah. So generally ordering things, maybe alphabetically or maybe by some sort of a mathematical formula, for example, is a great thing. Everybody loves it, but nobody wants to do it, and that's, I think, the core issue, right? Like, you can see, that the number of STEM graduates is maybe not enough, to actually fulfill the open positions, and at the root cause is probably that the queen of all scientists of all sciences, right, is hard, right? Mathematics is hard, and the neural networks, our brains, or large language models, or a lot of the AI techniques that we have are not very well suited to handle numbers. And maybe that could be a starting point for our discussions, where we kind of maybe we can dive into something that is happening right now in the industry.
Good. Well, and maybe you can correct me, but one analogy I make is just from my own process of thinking. I think in English, right? So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking in English and I'm putting two and two together and doing whatever my brain does, right? However, I just thought of, well, what about someone who does all that process but not in English? They could do have the same thoughts, come up with the same conclusions, but then they could say, translate this into English, because maybe your audience, the people you want to engage with or collaborate with, are in English. My father studied psychology, for example, and he had to learn German because almost all of the people in that subject were German and all the texts were in German, and maybe translation
Mm.
was cheap as it is now. But that lingua franca concept, what do you think? Am I on any part of math? Because I think it's the same. It's like it's a language. You have to practice it, I suppose. Um, who do you talk to in math? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting topic in itself, right? Like, if you want to study math or statistics or data analytics, some of those areas are relatively newer, some of those are very old. Some of those areas kind of culturally maybe are kind of maybe flourished in some countries more than the others.
Mhm.
And perhaps the textbooks that we are looking at today are maybe looking great, maybe they are published really nicely, but perhaps they are not as good as those that are maybe older. So sometimes that's my feeling, but let's say that everything is perfect, and let's say we would like to kind of find resources that can help us to do something with numbers, and we are able to find all those resources, and that's maybe what is kind of happening right now with AI, where we are indexing a lot of resources into those large language models. So chances are that we have a lot of books that are sitting in those GPTs that are on data analytics, right? Or calculus or simulation theory or game theory, right? So all this is sitting in there. So are those becoming kind of like an engine of a computation? Or maybe they are just sitting there so that you can quote them, but really you cannot apply them, right? So the applied mathematics or applied statistics or applied analysis or applied game theory is still a hard problem.
I think I'm part of that problem because, as you just mentioned, a textbook to me, at least in my very limited understanding, is still usually progressive and narrative in some ways, right? Or else I guess it's a broad overview. I'm only thinking like a history text where you you kind of have to see it in order. That's
Mm,
why work, right? They don't work if you skip to the middle. Now, if you say you're trained on a book, well, wouldn't that also? I mean, it's is it? I can't say that AI is ever clever, but does it understand the context? Like this is the advanced mathematics. You have to learn the basic before you get here part. Does
mm,
that make sense? Like, you see what I mean? Our book in itself is a construct of a way of understanding, right? You open the first page, and by the time you reach the last page, you should have gotten everything you need to know in order to reach the last
mm,
page, I guess. One of its things. If I just ask a question to AI, it might have been trained on that book, but it can't be trained on its sequence. I've noticed that a lot with AI because it likes to vomit out a lot of stuff. Have you ever noticed? Like it
mm,
overstates. Like here it is. Here's everything you need to do,
mm.
which humans tend to dislike, right? I only just need to do one thing. I need to get through chapter one.
Yeah, and maybe this is the easier part. I mean, I and that kind of qualitative analysis of text, maybe it is something that we already have, because
Mm-hmm.
if let's say you talk to GPT, you can always tell tell the model, hey, talk to me as if I am a beginner student,
Right.
and it's going to be pretty it's going to do a pretty good job actually changing the language, selecting an example that is going to be really basic,
Mm-hmm.
even though maybe the context is very high flying, right? So I would say that this is almost something that we already have. I think the applied part is actually harder, right? Like, hey, so let's we talked about it, right? The GPT created some nice narrative, maybe in whatever language you prefer, right? Maybe it will even translate this from the content from whatever language you want to another language. But then there's this applied part, like,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we should even step away from mathematics, because then it kind of have a little bit of a stigma that, oh, it's got to be hard, right? But maybe if we gonna
Oh,
go
I
in.
will say the great thing about mathematics is it has to be correct. That's the thing. Like number one, a
Mm,
bestseller on the New York Times means something for some reason, even though if you
mm,
looked into it, it probably literally
mm,
doesn't mean anything. I don't know. I was thinking about that today. It's very common to see a ranking or something like that be used just to get someone's attention. Sorry,
yeah.
it's math is easier in a way than qualitative stuff because qualitative things like it's the world's best, you
Mm.
know, also doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, but then qualitative also means, okay, so now explain to me, right? So let's say if you made that statement, then the AI should be able to kind of say, hey, but in this context, fast means this, right? So our galaxy is flying very, very quickly, very great speed through space, and it's colliding with another galaxy because it's in the 500 million years, those great speeds, will lead us somewhere into a, wrong place, right?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
yeah, so we can say that, or we can say, oh, you are totally stationary, you are sitting at your desk, right? So this is a qualitative analysis that the AI can do for you today, right? But again, like moving for a moment away from math, and I don't want to belittle any other sciences, but maybe if we go to economics, for example, right, where there is Nobel prizes given to completely conflicting, you know schools of economic thoughts, but they are still considered to be valuable by the Swedish, body that grants, those awards, right? So if we go there and now we kind of ask a question about some sort of economic model, maybe it's going to be, again, something that I like, like game theoretic, an equilibrium model. And then you ask, hey, so let's do something with it. Let's apply it to a specific problem. Then it's much harder, right? Or in management, right? Let's the fact that I load, 5 books by Peter Drucker into the memory of large language model does not mean that I can really kind of take advantage of those, right? I mean, I can have a conversation with Peter Drucker, so to speak, but I cannot really easily, turn myself into a great manager, right? I can't do
Well,
that.
hold that because I'd love to get your thought on this. So we're both big sci-fi fans, and I'm sure we
Mm,
both some Black Mirror episodes at one point or another.
mm,
But one human anyway, something that humans have always adored is this idea of living forever, right? To take
mm,
whoever we are and to package it in some manner and make it available, beyond our lifetime, right? Like we live immortality, I guess. That's right.
mm,
Um, uh, whatever that thing is you took a drink from anyway,
mm,
the
mm,
fountain of youth or whatever.
mm.
So, but practically, you just said something that I was thinking about. Love your thoughts. Is now can we do that? Like, can we take Jack? I mean, if you've written and done things, which I'm sure you have, and you put an LLM into it, let's say all of your chats and all of your who knows, all your emails, for example, that you've ever written, and put it into. Can I keep Jack around forever?
Mm,
Or am I fooling myself now because you just said by a couple of books you got a Peter Drucker that you could talk to, right? Like,
mm, mm.
is that uh, well? What's your thought other than me just going off topic as always?
Well, so let's say in a perfect situation, let's say you can make a perfect copy of Mike Dane, right? I mean, so if that
As
perfect
if
copy,
anyone, right? I don't think anyone
yeah,
does. But
yeah, but let's say, in the ideal technological situation, we solved all the problems, and next to you, at the same desk sits, a absolutely perfect copy of Mike. Is that copy gonna have your consciousness? Is that gonna be you? So whatever that copy thinks, is it gonna be your thought? Do you have some sort of a telepathic connection so that there you have like a joint consciousness, or is that just totally different person that is?
I would prefer to have a Jack. But
Yeah.
the other thing is, you are still you still kind of don't have much utility. Let's just say that we've cracked
Mm,
this code, right? How often do people want or need or could even benefit from talking to Peter Drucker? You see what I
mm,
mean? Because
mm,
some of the things that Peter Drucker and or others might be helping us with are, I mean, I'm sitting here looking at the markets that somehow a change of CEO just trashed my stock price. And I
mm,
kept thinking, well, the company still makes money and people still do things there, but apparently, this figurehead
mm,
moving on to another company is disturbing. That somehow now the magic is gone,
mm.
and I am pissed because I don't like my stock
So
going.
yeah, so there is a scenario that I can see might actually work here, right? So let's say the same Peter Drucker is actually talking to the CEO, right?
Okay,
And then
maybe
this
the
Peter Drucker, or they can have a conversation, right? So we have an AI system that the CEO is using, and then the CFO is using that system also, and maybe some other decision makers, maybe the board of directors, and maybe upper level managers have a conversation with that AI, with that set of knowledge. Then that's a big step to actually doing something with that knowledge with a little bit of an addition. And that addition probably was something that I wanted to talk about, which was, okay, so now let Peter Drucker not only talk to the person that is at the keyboard, but also let Peter Drucker talk to the database that represents the organization. Give it all the data sets that the organization can that has like a day-to-day operations, right?
oh
Maybe it's going to be sales records, maybe it's going to be quarterly reports, maybe it's going to be something that a team of managers, let's say, looks every day to improve performance, to kind of run day-to-day operation, maybe whatever is necessary, right? We'll let that AI have the same insight into data as the human beings in leadership positions have on daily basis, with all the with all the kind of like breadth and depth that people might have. If that is the situation that we can put together, and I think we are increasingly able to do that, then we have a lot more knowledge on the AI side, and we have also a lot more knowledge that we can extract from the data and kind of like add to the whole package. So that is, I think, the kind of topic of this piece that was last week on Bloomberg, where instead of large language models, they are talking about LQMs, large quantitative models that can actually look at the data and kind of do the same thing, the same magic that LLMs are doing, but with the data that represents the organization.
I took a long look at that, and I did share with you at least my initial thoughts, because we have two things. One is, I hate to say this, one is reality, which is people are much more emotion based. Apparently, the CEO stepping down was emotionally more impactful than its actual effect, right? The fundamentals of the company hopefully did not change at all in one
Mm.
day. But as we see from the way we value things, and I don't think the market necessarily is going to work to our favor. But if you talk about business, that's how business runs, right? It runs in some scale versus some economic um, constraints, of ones they often cannot control, right? Like they might have some insight, but most likely they don't. And the article that this is going along with is me trying to say, could we be more forgiving of risk? Could we be more experimental? Something that suits me personally as a creator, right? Like I don't know if I can quote this exactly, but it was a study about bees. If you have bees that are just kind of made toward optimization, right? They go and they get something and they bring it back. You have to have some bees that just wander around aimlessly looking for new things, because if your sources ever dry up, you would have no ability to take on new markets or find new opportunities, right? So there's always some part of any organization that has to be risk taking. 80-20, I think, was how nature does it.
Mm.
20% is often the first to go. you
Yeah.
know and now if you have a large quantitative model added to it with a large qualitative model, would people just be more less and less risk averse, I guess, is the point. Like, would you just try to eke out, every time I think of quantitative models, I'm like, I'm going to eke out one more penny out of this transactional fee, usually by charging somebody else another penny. Like, that's what I think of these models as being built to do. But I think you can tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I think I am more optimistic. I guess I am usually more optimistic than you are, right? So I think somebody said a long time ago that mathematics or sciences are those crazy tailors that make clothings for non-existing beings, and then somebody comes along and finds a fit, right? Hey, this jacket, fits that particular problem that I'm looking at.
Mhm.
And so I think the hope that I have is that with so much knowledge that people might have, like for example, Peter Drucker, identifying like high level ways of dealing with things, and
Mhm.
then the legions of mathematicians and other scientists that basically build those models, maybe not knowing about an application. It just seemed something seemed elegant, and they wrote a paper about it, right? And there's something else that seemed appropriate, and then maybe 50 years from now, it's going to be dusted off by somebody somebody who is just looking for some sort of a new encryption algorithm or maybe new ways to multiply two matrices. So if we have insight in that machinery that is kind of sitting idle, on Google Scholar and all these other resources, then I think that we may find models that will be kind of dealing with, let's say, risk. I mean, calculating beta, let's say, in which is a level of risk, let's say, in finance, right?
Hmm.
It's still a very complex thing. Probably, if you work for Wall Street,
Yeah.
probably they are looking for PhDs that devoted their life only to the single narrowly defined problem modeling risk, and maybe that's the way to go. But now I think we might open the floodgates of new algorithms or new research that is going to be kind of accessible through a conversation. So a large language model, this AI, will be kind of aware of your problem, that because you will describe it maybe through a conversation like we have right now, and then maybe a year from now, this conversation that we're having will have a sidebar where it's going to be basically showing computational models of things that we are kind of envisioning right now. That's coming from research papers, and other resources.
A very good point. And maybe I have the skepticism I have, which you are not a part of this, right? Is that your role in particular, let's just say your role in terms of either managing data or managing finances or something else, is usually optimization, right? And it's to minimize errors or anything
Mm,
like it isn't, hey, I've found this amazing new way of thinking about this stuff by experimenting with, let's say, an economist, right, who is usually not a mathematician, right? They're usually about behavioral things plus experimental work, right? Like Kahneman or someone who they're trying to match the sort of, hey, why do people act like that, with some sort of experimental model that explains and maybe predicts what might happen. So what I mean is you're taking probably the area with the least uh, training in creative thinking and asking them to open their minds up, because if you get a silly designer like me, I don't think they'll listen to me. And in fact, I've tried. I've worked on this my whole career to get
mm, mm,
people who are really good at optimization to understand how, no, you can actually cheat and you can use cognitive ideas to make things simpler or make things more accurate, which was a big work we did at Accenture, which is you spend a ton of time on refining this accuracy, but you don't get your predictions in until the day before the thing is due because it's too complicated to share. And I was like, well, you're kind of
mm,
ruining your own predictive models, right? Because you don't understand, like, this thing is a pretty good predictive model because it just measures all the time and it's probably fairly accurate, right? So,
mm.
if you're doing your quarterly earnings and you don't get your quarterly estimates in until the day before they're due, that's human behavior for me. You know what I mean? It isn't proactive and it isn't as creative. So all I'm saying, I'm sorry to anyone out there who is a data analyst or a finance, but again, they tend not to be valued for their out of the box thinking.
Yeah, so we kind of circled to another area, which maybe is a topic in itself, right? Like, okay, so how is this supposed to work, right? Like, what is the value? How do we value input that is probably maybe coming from, again, some kind of stigmas, right? Like, hey, this is just data analysis, right? I mean, we know it's hard, but it's just
Yeah.
numbers, right? So yeah, so what I'm thinking is that maybe if I can share my screen very quickly, because this is kind of going into the things that I am implementing right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let's say if we kind of look at this differently, like this is something um, that is really kind of maybe the knowledge that I would like to apply
Hmm.
to solve a problem, right? So maybe I have it, my AI has a data connection already, right? It can look at the databases. And then what I would like to have is this quantitative analysis that I would like to perform. And maybe I would like to do something with time series, right? And maybe I would like to maybe run a Monte Carlo simulation, right? So I guess we know, you and I, we know that there is a lot of value in kind of being able to calculate some sort of a, Bayesian statistics maybe, or um, macroeconomic effects of federal, interest rate cuts, and millions of other things that I now have access to through tools, let's say like Wolfram, where there's analytical libraries that I would like to have a conversation with. And through a conversation with my data, I would like to, develop a data stream that kind of takes that my databases into that processing engine, right? And then create a value, maybe through ways that I don't even anticipate, because I may not be, even if I'm, let's say, a data analyst, I may not be able to have a model of macroeconomics effects, in my quiver of tools that I'm aware of, right? Maybe this is something that only the economics department will be able to do, not a data analytics department. So what I'm trying to get at is that this could be a packaged solution, right? Like where you might kind of get the answers that you don't even anticipate, like that you will be able to create a model of a risk, or in model of an effects that will show up maybe 5 years into the future, because the model of the economic models that we can access is going to be that deep. So what I'm trying to say maybe is that the situation is a little bit changing, right? Like uh, maybe maybe this is the new dashboard, right? that everybody now
Oh,
has access to,
and
and
I'm saying, is it true? And I love this example, but I keep thinking back to these sort of correlation engines. Like they've been around for a long time, right? They just try to go through and find some weird correlations, right? Which is what people want. Like, hey, if
mm,
I do X, Y seems to happen, and that's unexpected, right?
mm, mm.
Um, but tell me more. Is that kind of just a newer, fancier way to do that,
Yeah,
or
and
here? I don't even know.
Yeah, I think yeah. So I like your example here. I think even today, after how so many decades of data analytics, data mining, and statistics, I think the concept of, let's say, correlation versus causality is still maybe escaping many people,
Ah, okay. Well, that's good to
right?
know
So
because
so now we have tools that finally can provide, black on white, maybe an explanation with data examples that are relevant to the organization. Like, hey, here's what's happening, and here's what would it mean if this was a causality relationship backed by the calculations that will be done by the AI in the background. And here's the correlation or some other statistical relationship that exists, backed with some other calculations that the AI can do in the background. And you can drill into both, asking questions about, hey, so if this was causality, what am I looking at? What if this was kind of light correlation, or some other relationship? What should I expect? So
mhm.
so now you can have the values from this analytical tools that are beyond anything that we had before, because otherwise you would have to maybe call a professor like yourself that is specializing in this area and say, hey, what am I looking at, right? Is this something that is worth my time or not? So you kind of have this analytical power kind of in maybe in your dashboard that you can open, like a background in your computer every day, and you can click on it, or you can talk to it, or kind of do whatever you wish, is the best kind of interaction model with that kind of new set of tools.
Well, all of that is anything that you can do to empower collaboration or discussion. I always think is a positive thing, right? Like, because nobody really does anything quite alone, but expertise is often either hard to come by or overworked. I think that was our last discussion, right? That people just, whenever you have that SME like knowledge, you get overwhelmed. And I was having just graded 20 projects. One thing that one thing that you mentioned and that might have to have this caveat is how to be future focused rather than past focused. So what I found out is I gave everybody a pretty good grade, even if I was disappointed in their ultimate attempts, because it's too late. Hey, this is over, right? You're not going to learn anything more at this point. And if I critiqued all of them and gave them good grades, which I'm going to see how that worked. Like, do people want a numeric, going back to this, do they want me to deduct points in order to prove to them what they did wrong? Or do they just want a critique and they want full marks, knowing very well that the point of all this was to apply it in the future, right? In the next project. Or like you said, hey, our EBITDA is down. It turns out that you haven't sold enough Ford Broncos or whatever people do on your dashboard, right? Well, that's information for action in the future, which could be, hey, it's Ford Bronco month now, and make sure everybody knows Broncos need to go. But then you have to come back and say, oh, whatever you did, yeah, that Ford Bronco month really worked out. And now your new problem is X. And I think that's always been the problem with any kind of insight, right? Is that it isn't all that useful. I mean, right? Like, as people, we're just not that able to take advantage of insights. We all suffer from probably anxiety over all the insights that we don't apply to our lives. So I'm very, very excited about a plethora of tools. As I mentioned before, I think all the work that people are doing by hand in my class, I've found tools that will do it for you in a number of seconds. But what they won't do is teach you why any of the decisions were made, pretty much, and what it doesn't empower you as much as it empowers someone who's already been doing it for years. And this might also be a separate topic, right? Do you have to know and have taste and know good from bad and have all these qualitative understandings to be able to use an AI solution? Because otherwise, numbers are just not going to lie. Hey, 100%, your car is due for a checkup, or whatever my car keeps saying to me, right? Like, it apparently knows better than me what I should do for it, but I still don't take it in because I'm too lazy.
Yeah, so if we consider your thought process, right, as a situation that is maybe in an organizational setting, right? So your grading process is, let's say, maybe kind of an equivalent of something that is happening in the boardroom, where decision makers are kind of deciding, the future of the company, maybe future investment areas, or what is going to be the next big move that the organization should make. And the research papers is basically the data set based on which that decision is supposed to be made, right? Then this is kind of an interesting conversation, right? Like, you are grading the paper, right? Because you have a certain rubric in your head, or maybe something really, really formal that you have to follow, right? Right. So let's say we apply the AI into the process, and we let the AI to kind of look
Great.
in.
Can we do that? Let's do
Yeah,
that, Jack.
and let's say maybe the criteria in the rubric would be, okay, so maybe let's look if there's any startup companies that had similar ideas that turned out to be very successful. that are very similar to an idea that was described in the paper, right? It was maybe fragmented, it was maybe unfinished, but let's say here's an idea in the paper that you can have a discussion about because we already know that the market responded to that startup company and they are very successful, right? So this maybe in a kind of like a doctoral seminar fashion, you would look at this research from a student, and as a professor, you would have a conversation that is going to be basically, hey, so let's expand on this, right? Because maybe this is going to be the big step. Maybe it's going to be a research paper that the student is supposed to submit. Maybe it's going to be something that leads to a PhD dissertation, right? So if you could have that kind of a conversation, then that would be great. I mean, and if you have an AI tool that can help you dramatically increase the breadth of your analysis by dramatically increase the breadth of of your rubric, then maybe that's the next step in education, right? Because why not to do it? Why not just limit this to a PhD level studies? Maybe middle schoolers should have the same conversation with the AI that is going to point out, hey, this is great, you can do this kind of more, or this is kind of maybe an idea that is similar to some other research that already exists. So that process now can be transferred into an organizational situation where the decision makers, the leadership of a company, can have the same conversation with their own data sets, with their databases. And also, if you have macroeconomic models or something that Wolfram is trying to do, like enrich the data with external data
Oh,
sets.
and a very good point of not
Yeah,
just
yeah.
uh, a causation or whatever correlation finding within a limited data set, which is
Mm.
often that kind of misleading probably until you can reference it maybe again like macroeconomically, like, oh wow,
Mm.
fuel went, we had a pandemic, right, is probably an answer to a lot of weird correlations, whereas if you didn't know there was a pandemic, you're just you're firing off a lot of
Mm.
triggers, there being an actual understanding that everybody else would have looking at it, but not the data itself.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm pretty sure these kind of systems already maybe exist somewhere, like maybe BlackRock, right? Is being such a huge investment company with very deep capabilities, maybe they are able to have this kind of a global analysis, right? Like they are managing trillions, right? And their primary objective is to allocate those assets into areas where there is going to be growth. And I think you can go pretty deep into quantitative and qualitative analytics that have to be synthesized. Or maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe they are in a position to actually create the economic environment, and maybe they are doing it on the actually supply side, right, so to speak, right? So they are the creator of the environment rather than analyzers or doing analytics on the environment. But one way or another, maybe in a reasonably small or medium-sized company, that kind of analysis is important because they cannot sway the market in their way. They have to follow the market, or they have to follow the trends, so that they are kind of they get themselves onto the path that is, let's say, a growth path, right? So again, what I'm trying to say is that the analysis now with the and maybe our next meeting should be about the databases, right? Far more mundane topic, like, hey, we are assuming that we have a connection to the database, and the AI can look into the database in depth, the way it's useful. But let's say that is something that we've got. Then today's topic is really, okay, so what do we do with that data? And I think we can do amazing things. And Wolfram is only one example where there's this computational engine now that can do math, or can do science for you through a conversation by a person that may not be a scientist by training,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that is maybe the huge a huge takeaway, that that yeah, maybe it's even lowers the value of science, even below today's levels, because maybe it's going to be, oh, again, AI is going to do this for us. But maybe that's the kind of something that we should just accept, that there is going to be a very thin slice of the economy that is going to be research and science, and it's going to be very few people that will be doing that kind of cutting edge stuff. But then whatever was produced over the decades and decades of research is not going to go into dusty proceedings that will be sitting on shelves somewhere in libraries. It's going to be live data that the AIs will be able to kind of synthesize and put into computation. And I think that's a even bigger win than we can imagine. That's just my feeling.
Well, and I love it. And I love this topic for our next meeting. And I do want to call it, for this conversation, I'm going to summarize by, well, I love, because I don't think you're too hostile to this, that there's always two sides, right? There's something countable, which is usually very actionable, yet it has to be actioned, to me, through psychology, right? You still have to mobilize, you have to do something, and then that leads to a measurement change, right? It's the advice aspect of all this that I think is interesting, and can you follow through on the advice? So I think that what AI has been doing for me is bridging the persuasion part, right? If we're only persuaded by the fact that our red light's on and it says empty, that's persuading me that I should probably stop and get gas. And then the thing fills up, and then I go again. Do I have any concepts of fuel economy? Do I have any concepts of all the things I can do with this much gas? No, I just know that I need to get some, because that's what the indicators told me to do. So if you take that out of that and say, well, what if instead you had an electric car? Or what if you bicycled there? You see it's this whole range of possible solutions that we tend to just ignore because we've got a fairly clear indicator and a clear solution. Raise prices is probably a great solution to almost anything, except, is it? Because psychologically, I've found people right now, because maybe this is a bad correlation, but junk food is so expensive that people have stopped buying it and have learned to cook more. And to me, that's a great idea of how the effect of this will always be a huge weight on any outcomes. Yes, you raised prices, but that didn't, in a sense, it changed people's behavior.
Yeah.
Different way than you expected it to.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the classical example of the invisible hand of the market, right? There might be so many invisible hands that we are now accessing through the AIs being aware of all the research and computation, that there might be other effects, maybe hopefully, right? Many of them really good. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I hope we use this for good. I do,
Yeah.
because I actually think it's a little harder. It's already evil. Let's put it that way. But some of that just comes down to, again, this numbers thing, right? Like it's the indicators say X, whereas we have the ability now to see beyond that. So once again, Jack, always great to talk. Can't wait to share this with others. Hope others are enjoying this somehow, because I certainly am. Thank you. Hopefully you are too, Jack. Next time, though, I would like a deep dive into data. And maybe one thought is, one of my favorite services is Airtable. Airtable now has a verbal way to ask it to create an application, which it will then create the application and the underlying database in order to support it. So
Yeah.
right, it's this sort of like full package to me of relating a concept down to its data. The data model is a big part of my course that I'm trying to teach, perhaps marginally successfully, is how important that data model is to whatever you do later.
Yeah.
So let's leave that for next time. And Airtable could be an example, or maybe there are other better examples. But to me, data models are a fascinating topic. And I know you can teach me a lot.
Yeah. That sounds like a great topic. Yes, the Airtable model is, I think, where we are going. So let's dive into this next time.
Cool. Next time.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Oh yeah, end scene. That was fun. Yeah, this is a blast. Thanks, Jack. You're fun.